Good morning everyone, welcome to Our Small Footprint. My name is Nyssa and we are a family of 8 who live off-grid in Australia. I wasn't going to put a video out this morning, but Tina asked me in the comments, I had mentioned something about making my elderberry syrup, and so she had asked me in the comments if I could share that. Now I already had all the footage from when I had made it, it had been put in my bulk lot of footage that I haven't got to yet. So I pulled it out and put it together, nice quick thing, and did a quick voiceover, and I'm going to share that now. So elderberry syrup is supposed to help with your immune system. It's good for sore throats and coughs. It's good for, cold seasons, things like that. And it's just a great natural sort of a booster. So this is how I make it. There is many different ways out there that you can make it. All of them have a similar concept. You don't heat the honey and things like that, but this is how we do it. So I'm sharing with you how I make it, but do your own research, and I've shared some dosages and stuff that we use it at the end of the video, but again, that's how we do it. So I can't say that that's definitive of how you should, but so please make sure you do your own research before you decide what's best for you, like any sort of a natural supplement or medication or anything like that. So here's how we do it. Enjoy, and thank you, Tina, for asking, and I will see you all again next time. So everyone makes their elderberry syrup a little bit differently. It's a little bit of a personal preference, taste, that sort of thing. So this is the way I make it, but doesn't mean that you have to actually follow it completely that way. So I add some ginger to mine. I have some lovely local ginger that I bought here that I diced up really small. You could grate it, you could dice it, whatever you want to do with it, just get it into smaller pieces. More surface area in the syrup means the more that's extracted from it, so you just want to cut it up sort of small or grate it or whatever you want to do. If you grate it, you're more likely to get a bit of residue in the syrup when you strain it, no matter how hard you strain it. So I prefer to just chop it up into little pieces because the kids don't like to get that sediment from the ginger. Once I sliced all that up, I then added some water to it. It's about 3.5 cups of water that I add, I find is a good consistency, and it's filtered water out of my Berkey, and so I add that to the pot. I also add a cinnamon stick and a few cloves. Again, that's a little bit of a preference. You don't have to add those flavorings if you don't want to, but we like the taste of it in there. And then I add about 3/4 cup of dried elderberries. Now, I bought my dried elderberries from iHerb, I believe. I do have some elderberry cuttings that I'm going to grow, but it's going to be a while before they're at a size that I'm going to be getting any sort of significant berries or anything from. So I bought some from, I'm pretty sure it was on iHerb, and I store them airtight to use for that purpose. So I use around about 3/4 cup to the 3.5 cups of water. I find that it's a good ratio for us. They are quite strongly flavored, and so some people aren't gonna like it too much. You're just going to have to see how you go with it, really. I put it all in the pot, and then I put it over low heat and I simmer it. So I'm going to simmer it for 45 minutes to an hour-ish, I suppose, and you just want it simmering at a point where you've got those little tiny bubbles all the way around the outside edge of the pot. You don't want too much movement in it. We're basically just steeping it in heat. So we're reducing it slightly, probably to about 2/3 of what it was, but you want to do it in a really slow process so that you're getting the most out of those berries that you can. So really low heat, gently bubbling at the edges. You sort of don't want to take anything too hot in this process. So you just want to encourage the berries to hydrate and then release their juices and the flavors from the cinnamon and the ginger and things like that, but you don't really want to cook it as such. You're just steeping it in heat so that it's doing what it needs to do. After about an hour, I pulled it off the stove, and then I mashed it with the potato masher just to get as much juice out of those berries as possible. So I just sort of gave it a really good gentle mash and let everything sort of permeate in that liquid, and then I put the lid on it and I let it steep again until it's a little more handleable. Just drop the temperature slightly so that it's a little bit easier to handle. So I just put the lid on it and put it aside for a while. Once it's at that sort of a still warm but not hot temperature, I strain it into a jar. So the berries hold a lot of liquid. So what I tend to do is I strain it over a strainer into a jar, and then I mash the berries and pour it off, and mash the berries and pour it off. You could put it in a cloth and squeeze it, but it stains really badly. So it depends on whether you've got something specific that you want to use for it, whether you care if you've got something that's staining, all that sort of thing. But it will stain everything, your hands, the cloth, everything pretty badly. So I don't handle it too much, and I try not to get it on too many of my cutting boards or my benches or anything like that because of the staining. It would make a lovely dye, and if I ever get really big trees and have heaps of berries, I might try using it as a natural dye in some linen or something, because it does stain everything and it's a really pretty vibrant colour. So you can squeeze it, but I tend to find that the easiest way to do it is just to mash it with that masher, pour off the liquid, mash it, pour off the liquid, etc. It's a bit time consuming, but I find that it's the most effective way without staining everything you own, and because it's pushing all that juice out, and you're doing it in small portions and things like that. So for me, I find that works the best. But you can put it in cheesecloth or a nut milk bag or a flour sack tea towel or whatever you have. Just be aware that it's going to dye the fabric and it's going to dye your skin and that sort of thing. So it really depends on your preferences there. Now, to make this palatable, we add it to raw honey, because raw honey is good for you as well. It's around about a cup, I find, of honey for this quantity of syrup works well. My honey has crystallized quite badly. So I poured it into this jar thinking I'd add the honey to it, and then thought, well, hang on, I'm going to pour the warm liquid back into my jar with the honey, and then that way it can dissolve the honey. So you don't want to put this on heat, because you don't want to heat your raw honey. Raw honey is raw. All the benefits that are potentially in the honey are because it hasn't been heated, because it's been extracted raw and it hasn't had that heating happen to it. Now, of course, you can use store-bought honey, you can use not raw honey and all the rest of it. It is going to flavour the elderberry syrup, which is going to benefit for taking that, and you're still going to get the benefits from the elderberry, but the raw honey has its own benefits as well that are combined with the elderberry, so that it makes, a double whammy type thing. So if you're using raw honey, you don't want to heat it. So you need to just use the leftover heat in the elderberry syrup to melt the honey. So all I did was I poured the warm syrup into my jar of crystallized honey, and then I used a fork to just break it up a little bit, shook it, and then scraped it, shook it, scraped it, and eventually it all dissolved. Honey doesn't take much temperature to dissolve. It's a bit like coconut oil. It's sort of like, body temperature is enough to dissolve it. So it doesn't need to be particularly warm, and you don't want to warm it up, because it defeats the purpose of raw honey. So I just added the warm syrup to the honey and then used that to get it melted into the jar. Once it was all melted, it goes in the fridge and it doesn't set back up. So once the whatever the catalyst between the elderberry syrup and the honey, or the ratio of liquid or whatever else, the honey doesn't tend to set back up. It just is part of the syrup. You give it a shake before you take it, obviously, but it all ends up being sort of this emulsified syrup, a little bit not hugely thin. I suppose it's a bit like cough syrup sort of a texture. It's not thick, but it's not thin either, and I find it perfectly pleasant tasting. I quite enjoy it. The kids screw their nose up at it, but that's kids, so it's personal preference as to how you like it, and you can add some other flavours too, I'm sure, to it, but this is the basic one that I do. So then we just store it in the fridge and we just take it by the spoonful. So the dosages are variable if you have a look at the research around, but being a natural supplement, it's sort of one of those things that you kind of can't overdo. So I give the kids a teaspoonful, and the theory is that when they're fighting something, then you can give it to them every couple of hours, sort of thing. So I find it slightly soothing on their throats if they've got a sore throat or a cough, and that's sort of like how the honey adds into the scope of things, but it's supposed to help boost immune systems and things like that. We use it because why not? It's another one of those things that it can't hurt, so we're going to use it as part of what we do. I have no idea how well it works, but it does taste nice. It's got a nice soothing sensation to the throat, and it does seem to help. So it's not going to hurt to do it. It's inexpensive to make, and it's better than giving them Panadol or something. So as an adult, I think you can take like a couple of tablespoons at a time. And again, when you're feeling really gross, you can take it every couple of hours, but otherwise it's a dose that you take once a day or that sort of thing. So there is a lot of variables of how much people take and that sort of thing, that I'll leave that up to you to make your decision on. But generally speaking, I do a teaspoon at a time for the kids. They can take it every couple of hours if they're really feeling gross. Otherwise, it's sort of a maintenance dose of once or twice a day in a season when things are looking like it's, in winter or everyone's a bit icky or whatever else. And as an adult, I sort of take big dessert spoons, and I might take them whenever I think about it. So it might be a couple of times a day. So I hope that helped. Tina requested that, so I hope that helped, and I will see you again next time. Thanks guys for watching.